The champagne was cold enough to leave water on my fingers when Celeste leaned toward me and whispered, without disturbing the smile she wore for the photographer, "If you really love Adrian, you'll leave before dessert and stay gone." White lights floated above the hotel terrace while 200 guests watched my only son dance with the woman he had married hours earlier. I did not answer. I set my glass beside a vase of white peonies and reached for my purse. A small silver coin slipped from the side pocket, struck the marble floor, and spun between us. Celeste glanced down as if it were loose change. A man at the next table did not. He stood so quickly that his chair scraped backward. His face had gone pale. "Ma'am," he said, staring at the coin, "were you called Lifeline 6? I closed my hand around it. "Not tonight," I said. Then I stepped into the elevator lobby, took out my phone, and made one call. When the trustee answered, I said 4 words. "Pause every family transfer." To understand why those words changed the evening, you need to understand what everyone in that ballroom thought I was. My name is Evelyn Shaw. I was 63 that night, a widow, a mother, and, according to Celeste's family, a retired nurse who had never learned how to relax. For 24 years, I served as an Air Force flight nurse, working inside loud, dim aircraft where every person strapped to a litter was living through the worst day of his life. That work teaches you things. Panic spreads faster than smoke. Fear often sounds like anger. The first person to lose control usually loses more than the argument. It also teaches you how easily quiet people are misunderstood. My husband, Robert, understood me better than anyone. He was an aviation engineer who left coffee beside my elbow when I was too tired to ask. We met at an airfield in Germany, and later had one son, Adrian, after years of believing children might not happen for us. When Adrian was 9, Robert and I used our savings to start Meridian Air Medical, with 2 aging aircraft and 1 rented office. Robert handled engineering. I trained crews and flew when we were short-staffed. By the time Adrian finished college, Meridian transported patients for hospitals, veterans programs, and disaster teams. To me, it was the civilian version of one promise. When someone is hurt and time is running out, you go. Robert died 8 years before Adrian's wedding. Pancreatic cancer reduced a strong, funny man to one narrow hospital bed in 11 months. In his final week, he asked me to bring him the company documents. He could barely hold a pen, so I steadied the pages while he signed. We placed Meridian's controlling shares, our lake cabin, and several investments into an independent family trust. Adrian would benefit from it, but he would not automatically control it. Robert had watched too many founders hand a lifetime of work to children who were not ready, or to spouses who treated marriage like an acquisition. There was one clause he insisted on adding: if anyone attempted to isolate, coerce, medically discredit, or remove a family beneficiary for financial advantage, the trustee could suspend distributions and voting transfers until an independent review was completed. I told him the wording sounded severe. Robert looked at me from the hospital bed and said, "Evie, protection is not suspicion. Sometimes it is love written down." Adrian knew the trust existed, but not every condition. We planned to explain them after he understood what ownership demanded. He became chief operating officer at 32. He was intelligent and warm. But kindness without courage begins confusing peace with surrender. Then he met Celeste Weller. Celeste was polished and almost impossible to dislike at first. Her father, Franklin, ran a private hospital network. She remembered birthdays, sent handwritten notes, and listened carefully whenever I spoke about Robert. 6 months after meeting me, she began calling me Mom. A year later, she started removing me from Adrian's life so carefully that each individual change looked harmless. Sunday dinners became couple time. The lake weekend was canceled because Celeste disliked the cabin. At Meridian's holiday dinner, my seat was moved from Adrian's table to one near the service doors. Whenever I objected, she smiled. "We're just building healthy boundaries." Adrian repeated the phrase later with the tired expression of a man who wanted the conversation to end. I told myself children grow and traditions change. Mothers who cannot step back become stories told in lowered voices. So I stepped back. I stayed quiet when Celeste requested a private valuation of Meridian, toured the lake cabin with a designer, and emailed our attorney asking whether a spouse could gain voting authority through a beneficiary. The attorney forwarded it to me. I printed the message, placed it in a folder, and did nothing. That was my mistake. People often say they never saw betrayal coming. Usually, they did. They simply kept renaming it until the truth became unavoidable. The wedding was held at Baltimore's Halcyon Hotel overlooking the harbor. Celeste's family paid for the flowers and entertainment. I paid for the ceremony and brought Robert's sister from Arizona. My name did not appear on the program. At the rehearsal dinner, Franklin raised his glass and welcomed Adrian into a family that understands legacy. Then he joked that Adrian had been raised by a very private lady who preferred hospitals and airplanes to society. Celeste's relatives laughed politely. Adrian rubbed the back of his neck and looked at his plate. Later, Robert's sister said, "He should have corrected that." "Yes," I replied. That single word hurt more than defending him would have. On the wedding morning, the coordinator told me the mother-son dance had been removed to save time, although Celeste had added a long video about her childhood. Robert's memorial photograph had also been hidden behind a column because its frame did not match the flowers. I returned it to the guest book. Celeste saw me. "Evelyn, please don't rearrange things. It is his son's wedding. And this is not a military briefing," she said softly. "You don't get to take over because something makes you emotional." The old version of me might have answered. The officer in me noticed that the wedding coordinator stopped writing and looked up. The ceremony was beautiful despite everything. Adrian cried when Celeste reached the altar. I remembered him at 6, standing on a chair to reach pancake batter, and Robert carrying him asleep from the car. Love does not disappear when disappointment enters the room. That is what makes family betrayal so painful. You still want to protect the person who is failing you. During the reception, Celeste introduced me to one of Franklin's board members as Adrian's mother, who used to do nursing for the military. Used to do nursing. I had treated open chest wounds through violent turbulence, kept a newborn alive during a hurricane evacuation, and repeated a soldier's daughter's name while holding pressure on his artery. But I only said, "It's nice to meet you." The man who stood when my coin fell was seated at Franklin's table. I recognized him, though he did not yet fully recognize me. Retired Major General Thomas Vail had commanded aeromedical operations where I served and later chaired the National Veterans Recovery Foundation. Franklin had spent months seeking his endorsement for a rehabilitation hospital. Thomas had aged, but his eyes were the same. Careful. Measuring. He had heard the call sign. Lifeline 6 belonged to one night 21 years earlier, when an evacuation aircraft carrying 14 wounded service members lost cabin pressure above a sandstorm. One medic was knocked unconscious, another broke his arm, and 2 litters tore loose. For 43 minutes, there was no rank inside that cabin, only work. I secured equipment with cargo straps, kept one patient breathing by hand, and directed a young corpsman through a chest procedure. We landed with one engine failing, and every patient alive. The official report credited the crew. One of the patients was Thomas Vail's son. Thomas met me 2 days later at a military hospital. I was bruised and angry that anyone called me a hero while 2 crew members remained in surgery. He pressed a silver command coin into my palm. "Keep it for the people who came home," he said. I carried it for 21 years. When Celeste told me to disappear, it fell between us. Thomas studied my face and stepped away with his phone. He was confirming his memory, not performing for the room. I called Helen Park, the independent trustee. "Pause every family transfer. I'll be there in 25 minutes, she replied. I returned because leaving would have made Celeste's story easier. She could call my absence proof that I was unstable or unable to accept the marriage. So I stayed. I greeted relatives, thanked the waiters, and posed for photographs before sitting in my assigned chair near the kitchen doors. If you have ever been called strong because no one wanted to notice you were tired, you know what that chair felt like. Some families do not throw you out. They move you farther from the center until you wonder whether you were ever there. At 9:15, Franklin walked to the stage and tapped a spoon against his glass. He announced, "One more wedding surprise." A screen lowered behind the band. The Meridian logo appeared beside the Weller Health logo. My stomach tightened. Franklin spoke about a future partnership, a new air medical network, and the joining of 2 family legacies. Guests applauded. Adrian looked confused, but Celeste squeezed his hand and kept him seated. Then Franklin invited them onto the stage for photographs beside a mock signing display. There was no agreement, no board approval, no permission to use Meridian's name. Celeste had not only planned my removal from the family, she had planned to present the company as part of her wedding gift. I stood. That announcement is not authorized. The applause ended unevenly. A few people kept clapping until they realized no one else was. Franklin's expression tightened. Celeste took the microphone. Evelyn, this is exactly what we were worried about. Her voice was gentle, concerned, practiced. We wanted tonight to be peaceful. Adrian and I agreed business decisions would be handled by the next generation. Adrian stared at her. We agreed to discuss it, he said. Celeste kept smiling. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe someone should take you upstairs. There it was. Erasure dressed as concern. A security supervisor stepped forward uncertainly. Adrian came down from the stage and stopped several feet from me. Mom, he said, please. Not tonight. He was asking me to absorb the humiliation so everyone else could remain comfortable. I did not choose tonight, I said. Celeste's smile thinned. You always do this. You make everyone afraid to move forward because you need to control everything Robert left behind. The guard reached toward my arm. Thomas Vale stood. Do not touch Major Shaw. His voice was not loud, but it crossed the terrace with the weight of a command people recognized before they understood it. The guard stopped. Thomas walked forward with an old military photograph open on his phone. He looked at me. Lifeline 6? I nodded. Thomas turned toward the guests. You have been introduced to this woman as though she spent a few quiet years doing routine nursing work. That description is not merely incomplete. It is an insult to the truth. No one moved. 21 years ago, an aeromedical evacuation flight carrying 14 wounded Americans suffered a catastrophic emergency over hostile terrain. Major Evelyn Shaw kept every patient alive, while members of her own crew were injured. One of those patients was my son. A fork touched a plate near the back. Thomas held up the photograph. It showed me beside a transport aircraft, younger, thinner, with a bandage over one eyebrow, and dried blood on my sleeve. My son has 3 children because she did not panic. He has a career because she refused to accept the casualty estimate she was given. Our family speaks her name every Thanksgiving. Celeste lowered the microphone. Thomas looked directly at her. Before you suggest she is unstable again, understand that I have watched senior officers lose control under less pressure than she handled before breakfast. Franklin stepped forward. General, we had no idea. That is because you never asked her a serious question. The elevator doors opened. Helen Park walked onto the terrace carrying a leather folder. Beside her was Meridian's board chair, Dr. Samuel Ortiz, a former Navy surgeon. Helen came directly to me. Evelyn, the suspension is active. Celeste's voice became thin. What suspension? Helen faced Adrian. The family trust holds 51% of Meridian Air Medical. No voting transfer has occurred. No merger, sale, partnership, or pledge of company assets can be made without trustee and board approval. Franklin glanced at the 2 logos behind him. Helen continued. 27 minutes ago, Evelyn reported an attempt to isolate her while financial representations were being made publicly. Under the protective clause signed by Robert and Evelyn Shaw, all pending distributions and succession transfers are paused for independent review. Celeste looked at Adrian. She can't do that to us. It was done to protect him, Helen said, not punish him. That was the second truth the room had not expected. Adrian assumed the company would eventually become his. Celeste behaved as though marriage made that transfer inevitable. Franklin had built an expansion plan around access to Meridian's aircraft, contracts, and clinical network. None of them had authority over it. Dr. Ortiz stepped beside Helen. The board also received copies of emails requesting valuation data, spousal voting access, and accelerated transfer options. Those requests were made before the engagement was announced. Adrian turned slowly toward Celeste. Her confidence weakened in small places. Her hand tightened around the microphone. She looked toward her father, then her friends. No one met her eyes. I was planning our future, she said. You were planning ownership, Adrian replied. I did it for us. You told my mother to disappear. Celeste looked at me. I was trying to create boundaries. No, I said. You were trying to remove a witness. Those were the last words I spoke to her that night. Thomas had Meridian's logo removed. Dr. Ortiz postponed any partnership discussion pending an ethics review. Thomas added that his foundation would not endorse people who used mental instability as a weapon against a decorated medical officer. Franklin did not argue. People like him understand when a room has stopped belonging to them. After midnight, Adrian found me alone near the harbor windows. The reception had ended without a final dance. Celeste was upstairs with her parents. Thomas had returned the silver coin to my palm. "I didn't know," Adrian said. He was crying, but tears do not automatically make a person honest. Sometimes they only mean the truth has finally become uncomfortable. "You knew she was pushing me out," I said. "I thought I could fix it after the wedding. You thought I could survive it until then." He covered his face. "I was trying to keep the peace. You kept everyone comfortable except me." He lowered his hands. "I should have stood beside you." "Yes." I did not soften the word. For years, I protected him from consequences because I believed love meant absorbing impact. That night, I finally understood Robert's clause. Protection is not suspicion. Sometimes it is love written down. Adrian did not return to the bridal suite. He met with Helen the next morning and did not ask for the suspension to be lifted. The marriage lasted 4 months. I never told him to leave Celeste. He attended counseling, reviewed the emails, and discovered she had contacted investment firms before the wedding about using Meridian's expected shares as leverage. When he filed for divorce, he did it quietly. The trust review lasted 9 months. Adrian remained at Meridian, but the board reduced his authority while he completed governance training. He accepted the decision without complaint. That mattered more than any apology. We rebuilt our relationship in ordinary places. A diner near the airport. My kitchen table. The lake cabin Celeste had wanted to redesign. The first time we returned there, Adrian found Robert's fishing hat hanging beside the door. "I let someone make me ashamed of where I came from," he said. "I waited. And I let her make you pay for my weakness." That is closer to the truth. A year after the wedding, Meridian created a training fund for civilian flight nurses entering veterans' emergency care. Adrian suggested naming it after me. I refused. We named it for the cruise. Thomas attended the opening with his son, who walked with a cane and carried photographs of his grandchildren. When he hugged me, I remembered the aircraft's vibration and 14 people trying to breathe. For most of my life, I believed strength meant staying useful, staying calm, and asking for nothing. Service taught me how to carry people through danger. Motherhood taught me how easily love becomes an excuse for carrying someone who refuses to stand. I did not ruin my son's wedding. I stopped pretending a ceremony could turn control into love. Celeste thought the greatest gift I could give Adrian was my disappearance. She never understood that disappearing was what I had been doing for years. One canceled dinner, one moved chair, one swallowed sentence at a time. The real gift was not the trust, the company, or the money Robert protected. It was the moment my son finally saw that peace purchased with someone else's dignity is not peace at all. People mistook my silence for weakness because they did not know what it had survived. I no longer needed them to know, but I was finally done letting them use it against me.